He had always been someone who moved through life quietly, observing everything, missing nothing. In the agency, he was known as a man who could enter any place unnoticed, extract information, and leave without anyone realizing he had even been there. Every mission that required precision, intelligence, and patience was his domain. He didn't seek attention, didn't enjoy praise, but those who worked with him knew his value instantly. His calm demeanor hid a mind that could calculate probabilities in seconds, predict outcomes, and act with unwavering focus. Colleagues often said he had a sixth sense for danger, though he insisted it was simply experience and attention to detail. Every movement, every decision was deliberate, and mistakes were almost unheard of. He had trained for years to be the perfect operative, and the agency relied on people like him to accomplish tasks that no one else could. She, on the other hand, was the opposite in some ways. While he was silent, measured, and introspective, she had an energy that seemed unstoppable. Her specialty was counter-surveillance, and she could notice things that others often missed. A shadow where it shouldn't be, a movement out of place, the subtle tension in someone's behavior. She could talk to people with ease, extract information, and remain charming, while her mind worked 100 steps ahead. In the field, she was as dangerous as she was intelligent. She had a sharp intuition and an even sharper mind, which made her a perfect match for difficult assignments. The agency trusted her implicitly because she never faltered. Never let personal feelings interfere with the mission. Their paths crossed during a joint mission, one that required the agency's top specialists from different divisions to work together. Neither of them had any expectation beyond professionalism. Meetings and briefings were filled with instructions, objectives, and timelines. At first, their interactions were formal, almost stiff. He respected her skills but kept her at a distance, believing that attachment in their line of work could only be a distraction. She, in turn, saw him as competent but reserved, someone who preferred solitude to teamwork beyond necessity. Both were proud, independent, and focused solely on their goals. The mission itself was complex, requiring coordination, careful observation, and the ability to improvise under pressure. It was a high-stakes situation where the smallest mistake could cost lives. Over the first few days, they began to notice each other's strengths in action. He would notice patterns, locations, and timing that others missed. She would read people, sense the smallest hints of deception, and act in ways that diffused tense situations before anyone else could react. Their skill sets complemented each other perfectly, though neither of them said it aloud. Slowly, their respect for each other began to grow, even if it remained unspoken, as the days passed. Small moments began to emerge that hinted at something more than professional respect. During a particularly long stakeout, she had noticed him adjusting his equipment in a way that made the operation smoother, silently improving the plan without being asked. He noticed her reading a crowd, anticipating movements that could have endangered the mission, and he realized she had an instinct that no training could teach. In those quiet moments, when the rest of the team was busy with routine tasks or taking short rests, they began to observe each other not with scrutiny, but with genuine interest. Their interactions remained professional, of course, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement of each other's abilities. He found himself silently noting her methods, thinking about how effective they were. She, in turn, began to notice his precision, how he handled situations calmly, even under extreme pressure. What started as admiration slowly shifted into something subtler, something neither of them could name yet. Both had been trained to suppress emotions, to prioritize mission above all else, but human instincts are rarely so obedient. Even the most disciplined operative can't ignore the sense that someone else sees them, understands them, and respects them in a way others do not. There were moments that tested their growing connection without ever breaking protocol. During one tense operation, a sudden threat emerged that could have endangered both of their lives. Without thinking, he moved to shield her, taking control of the situation with a calmness that made the danger seem almost manageable. She, in turn, covered a blind spot that had been overlooked, preventing the threat from escalating further. Neither of them spoke about it afterward. In their world, words were unnecessary when actions spoke louder. But in those moments, a bond was formed that went beyond teamwork. They saw each other not just as colleagues, but as people who could be relied upon completely when the stakes were highest. Back at base, after long nights of planning and executing missions, they would sometimes find themselves working late together. The office was quiet, filled only with the hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. During these times, small conversations began, brief comments about techniques, about the mission, about mundane details that felt almost normal compared to their dangerous work. It was in these quiet hours that they began to see each other as individuals, with thoughts, fears, and hopes that went beyond the agency's walls. He learned that she had endured challenges he could barely imagine. She discovered the quiet discipline and sacrifices that had shaped him. The more they learned, the more they realized how much they had in common. Despite outward differences, the agency noticed their growing effectiveness as a pair. Though none suspected the deeper connection forming between them, operations that previously required careful coordination among many people now seemed smoother with just the two of them leading. They complemented each other perfectly. His calm, analytical approach balanced her intuition and adaptability. The agency began to rely on them more heavily, trusting them with missions that could not fail. And yet, what the agency saw as professional synergy was slowly evolving into something profoundly personal. Despite this, both were careful to maintain appearances. Neither let their growing respect or admiration become obvious. They continued to follow rules, to act with the same precision they always had. They were aware that any sign of attachment could be dangerous, not just to themselves, but to the success of the mission and the agency's trust in them. Their lives were defined by secrecy, discipline, and control. Love, or anything resembling it, was considered a weakness, a distraction from the work that demanded perfection. And yet, in quiet glances, in the unspoken understanding during missions, something undeniable was happening between them. It was during a mission in a crowded foreign city that the realization began to take hold. They were tracking a target, blending into a bustling environment filled with ordinary life street vendors. Children playing, people moving without a care. He noticed her instinctively moving to shield a civilian from a potential threat, a simple act that revealed her empathy. She noticed the way he remained calm, always scanning for danger while remaining unobtrusive. For the first time, both understood that the bond between them had moved beyond respect and admiration. It was something deeper, a quiet, undeniable connection forged in the most intense, demanding circumstances. By the end of the mission, both were aware that the rules had changed. They were still professional, still disciplined, still the agency's best. But now, they carried a new awareness, a shared understanding that neither could ignore. This bond, though unspoken, added a new dimension to their partnership. It gave them strength, confidence, and a sense of unity that even the most dangerous assignments could not break. It was the beginning of something neither had anticipated, and yet neither could deny in those early days. The world of espionage, secrecy, and danger continued around them, unaware that two of its finest operatives were quietly, inevitably drawn together. They were still the agency's best, unmatched in skill, discipline, and loyalty, but beneath the surface, something human had begun to emerge, and as all those who have ever felt it know, once that spark appears, it can never truly be extinguished. As days turned into weeks, their professional relationship began to evolve in subtle ways that neither of them could ignore. They were still the agency's finest operatives, relied upon for the most sensitive missions, but now there was something quietly changing beneath the surface. It started in small, almost imperceptible moments. A glance that lingered a second too long, a voice slightly softer when speaking to each other, an instinctive understanding of what the other was thinking without saying a word. They both noticed it, though neither dared to name it. In their world, emotions were dangerous. Attachment could be deadly, yet there was a warmth, sense of trust growing between them that neither had experienced before. They spent long hours together in preparation for operations. The work was intense, sometimes grueling, requiring mental focus and physical precision. Nights were spent in front of glowing screens, analyzing maps, reviewing intelligence, and planning strategies. During these quiet hours, conversations began to move beyond mission details. It started with small things: remarks about coffee, jokes about the bureaucracy of the agency, observations about the city they were operating in. Then it moved to personal stories, carefully chosen anecdotes that revealed just enough to hint at their humanity, but not enough to make them vulnerable. He learned about her, about how she had trained herself to see things others overlooked, and how early experiences had shaped her resilience. She learned about the years of discipline, training, and sacrifices he had made to become the operative he was. Each story brought a new layer of understanding, a new appreciation for the person behind the skill. They discovered that they shared more than professionalism. They shared values, discipline, and a quiet commitment to doing what was right. Even when it was difficult, their teamwork on missions became seamless. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's actions as if they were extensions of one another. If he adjusted a plan, she adapted immediately, without hesitation. If she detected a hidden threat, he reacted instantly, covering the angle she had identified. No words were needed. Their connection allowed them to communicate silently through gestures, glances, and timing. It was the kind of efficiency that was admired by the agency. Though no one outside the two of them understood the bond that made it possible, despite their growing closeness, they were careful to maintain appearances. Both knew that any sign of attachment could be exploited, both by enemies and by their own agency. They were professionals first, and they never let personal feelings interfere with their duties. Yet, in the quiet moments between missions during long drives, stakeouts, or while reviewing plans, they found themselves talking more freely. They laughed quietly at each other's observations, shared thoughts on strategy, and sometimes simply sat in silence, comfortable with the presence of someone who understood them completely. There were small, unspoken tests of trust that emerged naturally. During one operation, he had to make a split-second decision to protect a civilian. She reacted instantly, covering a blind spot he hadn't noticed. Later, when the situation was resolved, they exchanged a look that carried more meaning than words ever could. It was a recognition that they could rely on each other in life-and-death moments, that each would have the other's back no matter what. It was thrilling, terrifying, and comforting all at once. They both knew that in their line of work, trust was rare, and finding it in another human being was extraordinary. Outside of missions, the intensity of their work created a strange intimacy. Long nights spent in safe houses or quiet hotels became opportunities to learn more about each other. She would notice the subtle ways he prepared for operations, how he meticulously checked equipment, and how his mind never truly rested, even in downtime. He noticed the small gestures she made that revealed her concern for others, her quick thinking, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. These observations deepened their respect and admiration for one another. Transforming into something more personal, their feelings began to grow quietly, but persistently. They found themselves thinking about each other, even when apart, replaying moments from missions, conversations, or small gestures that had left a lasting impression. The agency had trained them to suppress emotions, but human feelings are rarely so obedient. At least a strong, undeniable connection was forming. Both recognized it, yet both understood the danger it posed. They couldn't afford distractions, but they also couldn't ignore what was happening. It was a tension that pulled at them in equal measure, a mixture of exhilaration and fear. During one particularly high-stakes mission, that tension was tested like never before. They were tasked with infiltrating a location where any misstep could be fatal. The plan was intricate, requiring absolute precision and trust in each other's abilities. As they moved through the operation, their coordination was flawless. He covered her when she needed space to maneuver. She anticipated risks and neutralized them before he even saw them. In moments of extreme danger, the unspoken connection between them became their greatest asset. It was not just skill keeping them alive, it was trust, reliance, and an unspoken understanding that neither would fail the other. After the mission, when the adrenaline faded, they found themselves sitting quietly in a safe location. No one else was around, and the silence between them was comfortable. They didn't speak immediately, but their eyes met, and there was a recognition of something deeper. The thrill of the operation, the relief of survival, and the knowledge that they had done it together created a shared moment of intimacy. For the first time, they acknowledged, even if only internally, that their connection had grown beyond professional respect. It was during these moments that they began to question the rules they had always followed. The agency demanded loyalty, precision, and detachment. Emotions were considered weaknesses, distractions that could jeopardize missions. Yet, they both felt something undeniable, something human that no regulation could erase. It was a new kind of risk, one that came not from the enemy, but from within themselves. They were aware of the danger, yet they couldn't stop it from developing. Small gestures became more frequent, a hand brushing against another during the passing of equipment, a look that lingered longer than necessary, a quiet word of reassurance during tense moments. Each of these gestures carried weight, though neither spoke openly about their feelings. It was a delicate balance, expressing care without exposing vulnerability, connecting deeply while remaining professional. The duality was exhilarating and frightening, a constant reminder that love in their line of work was both precious and perilous. Through it all, their respect for one another only grew. They admired each other's skill, dedication, and moral compass. They recognized that their abilities complemented each other perfectly, that together they were stronger, more capable, and more resilient. Yet admiration alone had transformed into something more profound. Their growing bond was no longer just about efficiency or teamwork. It was about trust, understanding, and the subtle acknowledgement of a shared humanity that neither had expected to find. As the weeks continued, they also began to recognize the impact of their connection on their performance. Their synergy allowed them to anticipate threats, respond faster, and execute plans with an almost instinctive understanding of each other's movements. Missions that would have been challenging for others seemed smoother and more manageable when they worked together. The agency recognized their effectiveness, though no one could see the deeper bond that made it possible. They were, without question, the agency's best, and their quiet partnership had become an invisible force that enhanced every operation. Yet, beneath the surface, both knew that their growing connection was a risk. The agency demanded detachment, and any hint of attachment could have consequences. If discovered, they could face disciplinary action, reassignment, or worse. But despite this knowledge, neither could deny what was happening. The connection had grown too strong, the bond too real, and the trust too vital to ignore. They moved carefully, balancing professionalism with the subtle acknowledgement of something deeper, knowing that every choice could have lasting consequences. And so, life continued in a delicate balance. Missions, briefings, and operations filled their days, but each quiet moment together added depth to their connection. They learned to rely on each other not only for professional success, but also for emotional support in a world where trust was scarce. It was a slow, careful evolution, one that neither had anticipated but both had come to accept. The line between respect and something more had begun to blur, and neither could imagine going back to the way things had been before. By the end of this period, they were no longer simply colleagues. They were partners in every sense, professionally, strategically, and emotionally. Their connection was a secret, carefully guarded but undeniable. It gave them strength, focus, and a sense of unity that even the most dangerous missions could not shake. They were still the agency's best, but now they were more than that. They were a team bound by skill, trust, and the quiet beginnings of love, a force that neither the agency nor the outside world could see, yet one that would shape the choices they would make in the days to come. By now, their connection had grown into something neither of them could deny. It was no longer just subtle glances or shared understanding in the field. It was a quiet, persistent presence in their minds, following them even when they were apart. Each mission they completed together strengthened not only their professional bond, but also the personal one that was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. And yet, with this deepening connection came a new challenge that neither of them had anticipated. During a routine intelligence assignment, they stumbled upon something that shook their sense of duty to the agency. They were reviewing intercepted communications and operational data when a pattern began to emerge. A pattern that did not fit the official narrative of the agency's recent actions. At first, they thought it might be an error, a misread signal, or a coincidence. But the more they investigated, the clearer it became. There were decisions made at the highest levels of the agency that had resulted in serious consequences. Consequences that were being covered up. Lives had been lost, mistakes ignored, the blame had been carefully hidden. He felt a cold shock run through him as he realized the implications. For years he had believed in the agency, had trusted its leadership, and had dedicated himself entirely to its missions. The idea that those he had served so loyally could make such choices and then conceal them felt like a betrayal. She noticed his reaction immediately. In a quiet, controlled voice, she asked if he had seen the same thing she had. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were needed. They both understood the gravity of the situation. What they had discovered was not just a minor error, it was a profound moral dilemma that challenged everything they had been trained to uphold. For the first time, they were forced to question their loyalty. Could they continue to serve an organization that had knowingly caused harm and then hidden it? Could they maintain their professional detachment when confronted with evidence of wrongdoing at the highest levels? These questions weighed heavily on both of them. But what made it even more complicated was the personal bond that had grown between them. Their trust in each other was now intertwined with a shared sense of morality. They could not ignore the truth, nor could they face it alone. They began to discuss the matter quietly, in moments when they were certain no one else could hear. Every conversation was careful, cautious, but honest. They weighed the risks of investigating further against the potential consequences of staying silent. Both knew that pursuing the truth could make them targets, not only of external threats, but of the agency itself. Yet neither could walk away. Their sense of right and wrong, their integrity, demanded action. And, almost instinctively, they chose to act together. Their growing feelings for each other made the decision both easier and more dangerous. Working as a team had always been about efficiency and trust, but now it had taken on a new dimension. They shared a common purpose that was deeply personal. Each knew that if something went wrong, they could count on the other for support, protection, and guidance. The professional bond they had built over months of missions became a lifeline in a situation where rules, loyalty, and survival were all at risk. As they dug deeper, the evidence became more compelling. They discovered records, internal communications, and decisions that clearly demonstrated cover-ups and mismanagement. It was shocking, but it also confirmed what they had suspected. The agency was not infallible. Those at the top were willing to prioritize appearances over human life. They realized that staying silent was no longer an option. Their growing awareness of the truth created a new kind of tension, one that was personal, ethical, and dangerous. At the same time, they had to maintain appearances. They continued to perform their duties flawlessly, executing missions, attending briefings, and coordinating operations without arousing suspicion. Their colleagues noticed their effectiveness and synergy, but none could see the moral struggle that was unfolding beneath the surface. Every step they took, every decision they made, had to be precise and calculated. They were aware that a single mistake could expose them and place them in immediate danger. The stakes were higher than they had ever faced, and yet they moved forward together, relying on their trust and growing bond to guide them. This period tested not only their skills but also their emotions. Both felt the weight of responsibility, not just for themselves, but for the innocent lives affected by the agency's actions. They debated long into the night, sharing fears, doubts, and questions that had no easy answers. Their conversations were intense but intimate, drawing them closer even as they faced unprecedented challenges. It was a rare kind of connection, one forged in danger, shared purpose, and the recognition of each other's moral compass. During one mission, the stakes became dangerously personal. They had to infiltrate a location where critical evidence was being kept, and the operation carried the risk of exposure. Every movement was tense, every step calculated. He noticed her subtle adjustments as she navigated through the security measures. and she anticipated his moves as he neutralized potential threats. It was a flawless execution, but both knew that the real danger lay ahead. The evidence they carried could change everything, and it also meant they could no longer hide their awareness from the agency. After returning from that mission, they sat together in a quiet room, reviewing the information they had gathered. The weight of what they had discovered pressed down on them. For the first time, they discussed the possibility of taking action beyond the agency's knowledge. Could they expose the truth? Could they risk everything for what was right? The questions were frightening, but neither could ignore the moral imperative. And as always, they turned to each other for reassurance and strength. Their feelings had grown deeper by this point. The bond that had begun as professional admiration had evolved into something more profound. They were aware of it, careful not to act impulsively, but it was impossible to ignore. The emotions added urgency to their mission, clarity to their decisions, and a sense of connection that went beyond survival. In a world where trust was rare, they had found it in each other. And now, that trust was intertwined with the most important decision they had ever faced. Whether to stay loyal to an organization that had betrayed its own principles, or to risk everything to expose the truth, they spent long nights planning, discussing, and weighing options. Every scenario carried risks, professional, personal, and even legal. They were acutely aware that once they acted, there would be no going back. But the idea of doing nothing, of ignoring the evidence, and remaining loyal to an organization that had caused harm was equally unbearable. It became clear to them that their choices would define not only their careers, but their very identities. They were no longer just operatives. They were individuals grappling with morality, loyalty, and love in equal measure. In these moments, their connection became a source of strength. They relied on each other not only for practical support, but also for emotional resilience. When doubt crept in, they reminded each other of the stakes and the importance of acting with integrity. When fear threatened to paralyze them, they found courage in their shared purpose. And in the quiet, stolen moments between discussions of strategy and morality, they found comfort in each other's presence. A reminder that even in the most dangerous circumstances, they were not alone. Eventually, they realized that the choice was clear, even if the consequences were terrifying. They could no longer serve an organization that had violated the very principles it claimed to uphold. They had to act, and they had to act together. The bond they shared gave them the confidence to make that decision. It was a turning point, a moment when love and morality converged, forcing them to confront the reality that their loyalty could no longer be divided. They were aware of the dangers, yet they were determined to follow what they knew was right. As they prepared for the next steps, the world around them continued, unaware of the storm gathering beneath the surface. Missions, briefings, and routine operations continued. But the tension between duty and morality, loyalty and truth, weighed heavily on both of them. Every interaction with colleagues, every decision in the field, carried the unspoken awareness that the next move could change everything. Their professional skills were still vital, but now, the emotional and moral stakes were just as high. Through it all, they found solace in each other. Their connection, once a quiet undercurrent, had become an essential part of their lives. It was a source of courage, focus, and resilience, allowing them to navigate a world that was increasingly uncertain and dangerous. And though neither could fully predict the consequences of their actions, they knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Their love, trust, and shared sense of morality had become inseparable from their mission, shaping not only the choices they would make, but the people they had become. The moment of reckoning arrived faster than they could have anticipated. For weeks, they had carefully covered their tracks, taking every precaution to hide their investigation from the agency. They knew the risk of being discovered was real, but they believed that their caution, their skills, and their trust in each other would be enough. Yet, in a world as precise and controlled as theirs, even the smallest anomaly could be noticed. And that anomaly had finally been detected. It began with subtle changes in behavior from colleagues they had once trusted. Messages that went unanswered, meetings canceled without explanation, and the occasional look of suspicion in briefings that had previously been routine. At first, they tried to ignore it, assuming it was coincidence or unrelated to their actions. But when their access to certain databases was suddenly restricted, and they were reassigned to mundane administrative tasks, they realized the truth. The agency was watching them. They were being investigated. The next warning came in the field. During what should have been a routine operation, they noticed anomalies in the support they were receiving. Equipment was delayed, communications were interrupted, and backup seemed mysteriously absent. It wasn't a mistake. Someone was deliberately undermining their effectiveness. They understood immediately that the agency itself was now a threat. The very organization that had once trusted them implicitly was now suspicious of them, and suspicion in an organization like theirs could escalate quickly into something far more dangerous. It was a quiet evening when the final confirmation arrived. They were summoned to a secure briefing room under the pretense of reviewing their last mission. Instead of commendation, they were confronted with allegations: unauthorized investigation, breach of protocol, and disloyalty to the agency. The evidence presented was carefully curated, emphasizing their actions without acknowledging their intentions. The accusations were precise, calculated, and chilling. In an instant, the people they had worked alongside, trained with, and trusted had become their adversaries. The reality of their situation hit them hard. Overnight, they were no longer the agency's top operatives. They were labeled traitors. Orders went out for their immediate capture, and their credentials were revoked. Every advantage they had, once held, every resource and ally, was suddenly turned against them. It was a stark reversal, a betrayal that cut deep. But despite the shock, they did not panic. They had trained for situations like this. They had prepared for danger. And most importantly, they had each other. The first step was to escape the facility without drawing attention. Using a combination of skill, careful planning, and their deep understanding of the agency's procedures, they moved quietly through the corridors. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. They relied on each other completely, their bond proving more valuable than any tool or weapon. Where he calculated the safest routes, she anticipated potential obstacles and neutralized them before they could become problems. Together they moved like a single entity, silent and precise, aware that any mistake could be fatal. Once outside the immediate danger, they had to think quickly about their next steps. They were cut off from communications, resources, and allies. The agency's reach was extensive, and they knew that staying in one place for too long would be deadly. They decided to disappear, relying on their skills to evade surveillance, avoid predictable patterns, and move undetected. The world they had known, the structured life of assignments, briefings, and precise operations, was gone. In its place was a reality where every decision carried life or death consequences. During their flight, they faced constant tension. Every city, every street, every interaction had the potential to expose them. They had to move with extreme caution, sometimes traveling days without rest, relying only on what they could carry and the knowledge they had acquired over years of training. Yet even in this perilous situation, they remained calm, each drawing strength from the other. Their connection, once a subtle undercurrent, had become essential. Trust and reliance were no longer just professional, they were personal, a lifeline that kept them going when fear threatened to take over. They encountered numerous challenges along the way. Surveillance teams appeared in places they thought were safe. Trusted contacts were suddenly unresponsive. Every action had to be scrutinized, planned, and executed flawlessly. Yet, each challenge reinforced the importance of their partnership. They communicated with subtle gestures, quiet signals, and shared glances. Every successful maneuver strengthened their confidence and deepened their bond. They realized that survival was no longer just about skill, it was about unwavering trust in each other, about knowing that neither would falter when it mattered most. Despite the constant danger, moments of humanity and intimacy still appeared. During a brief rest in an abandoned safe house, they shared quiet conversations about what had led them here, about the agency they had once believed in, and about the choices that now defined their lives. They talked about the fear, the uncertainty, and the moral weight of their actions. These moments, though fleeting, reminded them of why they were fighting, not just for survival, but for integrity, justice, and each other. Their bond became more than a strategy for survival. It became a source of emotional strength that neither could do without. The deeper they went into hiding, the more they understood the magnitude of their situation. The agency had vast resources, but they also had advantages that few others could match: intelligence, experience, and a unique understanding of the systems designed to capture them. Every step they took was informed by years of training and countless hours of preparation. They were constantly aware of the stakes, yet they moved forward with determination. Each decision was deliberate, balancing risk with necessity, and each moment reinforced the importance of their partnership. As days turned into weeks, they adapted to life on the run. They developed routines, safe routes, and strategies for staying invisible. Yet even as they became more adept at evasion, the psychological toll was undeniable.
Ow.
Every sound, every shadow, every unexpected movement carried the potential for danger. They had to maintain constant vigilance, yet they also had to preserve their mental strength. Their connection became the anchor that kept them grounded: shared laughter, quiet reassurances, and the knowledge that they could depend on each other provided small but vital relief from the constant stress. Along the way, they began to notice how much their relationship had evolved. The trust that had formed during missions now extended into every aspect of their lives. Decisions that once would have been made independently were now made collaboratively. Every plan, every risk, every action was considered together. Their connection was no longer just an advantage, it was essential to their survival. In a world where isolation could be fatal, they had found not only an ally, but a partner in every sense of the word. Even in the face of danger, they held on to hope. They were aware of the risks, the potential consequences, and the relentless pursuit by the agency. Yet they also recognized the freedom they now had, the ability to act according to their own principles, the chance to shape their own future, and the knowledge that they could face any challenge together. It was a rare and precious thing, a beacon of light in a life that had become increasingly shadowed by threat and uncertainty. Their journey on the run was not just a test of skill, but also a test of character. They had to confront fear, doubt, and the knowledge that betrayal could come from any direction. Yet through it all, they remained steadfast. They adapted, improvised, and overcame every obstacle, drawing strength from their shared purpose and deepening connection. They were no longer merely operatives, they were partners in the truest sense. Bound by trust, love, and the understanding that together they could face whatever the world or the agency threw at them. By the end of this period, they had transformed from trusted agents to fugitives. They were branded as enemies, hunted by the very organization they had once served with dedication and pride. Every resource, every ally, every familiar system was now a potential threat. Yet, despite the danger and the uncertainty, they were not defeated. Their connection, forged in missions, tested by danger, and strengthened by trust, had become their greatest asset. It allowed them to move forward, to survive, and to face a future where nothing could be taken for granted. Even as they disappeared into the shadows, they understood that life would never return to what it had been. The agency they had served so faithfully was gone from their world, replaced by a constant need for vigilance, planning, and careful action. Yet, amidst the fear and the challenges, there was a profound sense of freedom. They had chosen each other, and that choice, more than anything else, gave them purpose, courage, and the determination to endure whatever lay ahead. After weeks of running, hiding, and constantly looking over their shoulders, they knew the moment had come to make a decision. The choices before them were stark and life-altering. They could surrender to the agency, give up their freedom, and face whatever punishment awaited them. Or they could act, exposing the truth they had discovered and embracing a future that was uncertain but honest. For the first time since their journey began, they had a chance to take control of their own destiny. They sat together in a quiet, abandoned safe house, reviewing all the evidence they had gathered. Every document, every recording, every record told the same story. The agency had knowingly covered up mistakes, put innocent lives at risk, and manipulated the narrative to protect itself. The truth was undeniable, but so was the danger of revealing it. If they released the information, the agency would come after them with everything at its disposal. Every resource they had once relied on would now be turned against them. Yet staying silent felt impossible. Their moral compass, strengthened by shared experience and the trust they had built, demanded action. For a long time, they didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. Both understood the weight of what they were about to do. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice steady but quiet. He spoke of justice, of the lives lost, and of the people who deserved the truth. She listened, nodding, her own thoughts aligned with his. She spoke then about integrity, the courage to do what was right even when it was dangerous, and the realization that the bond they shared had given them strength to face the impossible. Together, they reached the same conclusion. They would expose the truth, no matter the cost. Their plan was careful and deliberate. They could not rely on conventional channels, and every action had to be calculated. They created secure methods to release the information, ensuring that it would reach the right people without revealing their location. Every step was planned with precision. Drawing on their skills as operatives and their understanding of the agency's systems, it was meticulous work requiring patience, attention to detail, and absolute trust in each other. Mistakes were not an option. Failure was not an option. As they prepared, they reflected on how far they had come. Their journey had begun with quiet admiration and respect, evolved into deep trust, and finally become something much more profound: love. The challenges they faced had forged a bond stronger than any training, deeper than any shared mission. It was a connection that could not be broken by fear, danger, or even betrayal. They had learned to rely on each other in every way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And now, that bond would guide them through the most important mission of their lives. When the time came, they executed their plan flawlessly. The evidence was released to trusted channels, reaching journalists, investigators, and oversight committees outside the agency. The truth spread quickly, undeniable and shocking. The agency could no longer hide its mistakes or manipulate the narrative. Those who had once considered themselves untouchable were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. And though the agency would attempt to locate and punish them, they had already anticipated the response, moving with speed and precision to stay one step ahead. In the aftermath, they found themselves in a strange new reality. Their names had been erased from official records, their careers destroyed, and their professional lives irreparably altered. They were fugitives in the eyes of the agency, yet free from the constraints that had defined their existence for years. For the first time, they could make decisions without being bound by orders or expectations. It was frightening, uncertain, and exhilarating all at once. And through it all, they had each other, the one constant in a world that had been turned upside down. They disappeared from the public eye, moving to a new location under assumed identities. The adjustment was challenging. Every day required vigilance, caution, and careful planning. Yet they embraced the opportunity to start anew. Without the weight of the agency's control, they could live life on their own terms. They found simple joys in small routines: cooking together, walking in quiet streets, sharing conversations without fear of interruption or surveillance. The freedom, though hard-won, was sweeter than anything they had known before. Even in this new life, their experiences and skills remained invaluable. They adapted their knowledge to a world beyond espionage, finding ways to contribute without exposing themselves. Their bond, strengthened by every trial and danger, became the foundation of their shared existence. They had faced the ultimate tests: loyalty, morality, danger. And betrayal and had emerged not only intact but stronger, together. The love they had discovered in the midst of chaos was now a guiding force. Giving meaning to every choice and every step they took, they also reflected on the moral weight of their actions. The exposure of the agency's secrets had consequences, both intended and unforeseen. Some careers were ruined, some policies were changed, and some innocent lives were vindicated. Yet, they did not regret their choices. They had acted according to what they knew to be right, guided by integrity and courage. The bond that had carried them through danger now allowed them to live with clarity and purpose. Every risk they had taken, every decision they had made, had led them to a life defined not by fear or orders, but by choice, love, and honesty. Through it all, they never forgot the moments that had shaped their journey. The quiet stakeouts, the tense operations, the shared victories, and near misses, all of it had led them here. Every challenge had strengthened their connection. Every danger had deepened their trust, and every decision had reinforced the moral foundation that guided them. They understood now that the journey itself had been as important as the destination. They had discovered not only love and trust, but also the courage to act according to their principles. No matter the cost, in the end, they built a life together that was simple, quiet, and free from the shadows of their past. They chose to remain hidden, to avoid attention, but they also chose each other. That choice, more than any mission or operation, defined them. It was a choice rooted in loyalty, trust, and love, a choice that gave them the freedom to live authentically and honestly. They no longer worked for the agency, but they worked for something far greater, each other, and the principles that had guided them through danger and betrayal, even years later. They would look back on their journey with a mix of awe and gratitude. The agency that had once demanded complete obedience and rewarded skill, without question, had become irrelevant to them. What mattered was the life they had built, the truth they had revealed, and the bond they had forged in the crucible of challenge and danger. Their love, tested in the most extreme circumstances, had endured. It was not a love born of convenience or ease, but of trust, courage, and shared purpose, a love that had been forged under fire and survived every test in this new life. They could finally breathe, reflect, and plan for the future without fear. They explored the world at their own pace, learned new skills, and found joy in the small, ordinary moments that they had never been able to enjoy before. Every day was a testament to the choices they had made, the courage they had shown, and the trust they had placed in each other. They were no longer operatives in the agency's shadow. They were partners, equals, and companions, navigating life together. And so, they lived free in body and mind, guided by the principles that had always mattered: honesty, integrity, and love. They had faced the impossible, survived, and emerged stronger, not because of the agency's training or accolades, but because of their choices, their courage, and their unwavering trust in each other. In the end, they had everything that truly mattered: freedom, truth, and each other.